how is it that we measure emotional intelligence anyway? I mean, that's a question that a lot of people have asked, and when it comes down to it, we just really don't know, do we? So today, we're going to talk about how we actually can measure emotional intelligence and what we can do about that and how we can improve our lives in both our personal and professional aspects. So all of us have an internal desire to do better, to be better humans. But somehow through our lives, we just lost the ability for hope or lost the ability to really know how to change and how to improve. And so what we're going to talk about today and what we're going to really share with you today is a method and a methodology on which you can take this methodology and begin to improve. And then in the end, we can actually measure how well we're doing from our emotional intelligence aspects. So to begin, we're going to talk about three things: the relationships that are important to you in your life, how our behaviors are impacting those relationships in a positive and or a negative way, and what we can actually do about that and measure our success. To do that, we're going to introduce you to this model called the Believe, Behave, Become model. So in the Believe, Behave, Become model, what we have here is a methodology for change. It's a simple model or a framework, that I'd like to say, that carries with it a language. And if we can understand the framework, how the framework works, and the language associated to the framework, we can utilize this framework in our lives. We can improve the relationships that are most important to us by improving our behavior and, more importantly, getting up into our belief systems to truly understand what's making us tick. So let me describe this model and how the model works. The model begins up here in the belief stage. There's all kinds of things that we'll talk about that influence our beliefs, but ultimately we all have settled in on some beliefs that are important to us that are pretty deep-seated. So we take our beliefs, and those beliefs drive down into our behaviors, or if I could put another word on the board, what we actually do. So as we're living our lives, we are doing certain things or we're behaving certain ways. And it's through those behaviors or what we're actually doing that we become who we are. And another way that we can say this is, or the results that we're currently getting in our lives. Now, as you think about these results that we're getting, for most of us, we're getting results that are both positive and negative. So as we're thinking about the results and we're thinking about those important relationships in our lives, I'd have you just stop for a minute and pause and think about the most important relationships. And if you were to measure how effective you think you are in those relationships, what would they be? Would there be any of those relationships that you find yourselves maybe going, I wish I could just be a little bit better in that relationship? Or are there relationships you say, man, I love that relationship and that's so good? So all of us have those kinds of things, but what we want to be able to do now as we're talking about emotional intelligence is our ability to be able to improve the relationships, all of those relationships. Even ones that we think today are good, they can be so much better. And ones that maybe we're not doing as well as, we can improve those relationships. So that's the conversation we're going to have as we go through this. So let's start now with an example of a relationship. So down here, let's say I've got a relationship with my teenager. And as my son was growing up, we had some struggles. We had some battles in our relationships, but I think most parents probably do with their teenage kids. With this son, I had some very strong battles that I was not willing to lose on. And that was actually behavior that I exhibited. That when we would come in contact with each other and these certain things were happening, my behavior was not kind, my behavior wasn't loving, my behavior was not accepting of him and who he was. And that drove a result that the two of us weren't very close at all. And I realized that. And so as I looked at this now and I go to this model and I say, well, here's this result with this son. It's not the result that I want. Why do we have this result? And so I can now go through this model and I ask myself the question, why? Why do I have this negative result with my son? And as I started looking at that and taking control of only what I can control, because I think for most of the time we begin to blame, I blamed him for a lot of that, right? Oh, well, he did this and he did that. But now I want to own what it is that I can do. And so I take my behaviors and I start looking at. And some of the behaviors that I exhibited with him were I would get distant from him. I would get angry and I would behave towards him in a very angry way when he would act and behave in these certain ways, which then would drive the result that we're getting, right? So you can see how that plays out. My behavior was then driving a result that I was not happy with, and I wanted to improve that. So now, why did I behave that way? I mean, what parent, what human would think that it's okay to behave mean, aggressive, and some of these behaviors that were driving the results that I want? How do I think that that would even be okay? But I had developed some belief systems about being a parent, right? So now I'm moving up into my belief systems. Why did I behave that way? Because I had some belief systems, and I had some belief systems up here that were, I think, a little messed up from a perspective of how they were designed and developed over time. So now as I started to think about those behaviors and what was going on up in my belief system, I really had to analyze myself and analyze my thinking associated with that. And I came down with this. Why did I think it was okay? What was the belief system that was going on? And I put an exclamation point because that is really how I felt. I'm the dad. He's the son, and his job is to listen to me, follow me, respect me. And so because I'm the dad, that gave me permission to behave in ways that wasn't really appropriate, according to the results that I really wanted to get. So now what I had to do was I had to be able to take this model and say, now how do I improve it? Well, what I did was I had to create a new belief system. So I started looking at what do I really want? What are the behaviors that I really want to exhibit? So what I did was I made a list. And as I was listing behaviors that I knew that I wanted to be and do around my son, there were behaviors like kindness. That was important. I wanted him to know that I was kind. I wanted him to know that I cared about him as a son, as a human being. And ultimately, I wanted him to know that I loved him. So I realized as I looked at these words, and now I looked at the results that I was currently getting, and I realized I wasn't very kind. I wasn't really that much caring. I was more caring about how I felt and what was important to me. And I definitely wasn't letting him know how much I loved him. And so now I had to create a new belief system, because if this belief system drove these behaviors of unkindness, lack of caring and love, then I needed a new belief system. So I created a new belief system, and the new belief system came out something like this. I'm a dad that is kind, loving, so I'm a dad that's kind and loving and holds his kids accountable. Because still there was an aspect of accountability that was important to me that he needed to understand and know. So I started to implement that new belief system. Now, how does that happen? How do you implement a new belief system? Well, what was important is that to try to do it on my own, couldn't do it. We are literally almost incapable of changing our own belief systems without some kind of help. So I went out and asked for some help. Now, who did I ask? Well, the people that were most important to me. So I asked my wife, if you ever see me acting and behaving towards Dallin in a way that was not kind and loving, let me know. And more importantly, probably the most important person I told was this son, Dallin. And I wanted him to know that I wasn't happy with where we were in our relationship. And I wanted to improve. I wanted to be a better dad. And so here's my new belief system, son. And anytime I'm behaving in a way towards you that isn't driving what it is, the result that I want, you have permission to let me know. So off we went, and we went on this journey together. And there was many times where I was finding myself getting to that point, and somebody in my family would say, Dad, you're not being who you want to be. Or Dallin would say, Dad, not sure if you're aware of it, but you're going off on that, that tangent again of where you don't want to be. And it took a while, it took years. And I can tell you today that I have one of the most wonderful relationships with my son today. Of all my 7 kids, I've got this relationship with him that's probably a little bit more special than even some of the other children, only because I put so much work and effort into that relationship. So now let's just sum this all up. So what do you need to do to actually measure your emotional intelligence? Start right here on this model. Identify those relationships that are most important to you, and then start to assess how well you're doing in those relationships. Pick a relationship that you want to improve. Find out what behaviors you're currently exhibiting that are driving those results that you're currently getting. Now take those behaviors and then go up here and challenge into your belief system what's really happening. What belief systems are driving those behaviors? And then sit down and really think about, well, what would be a new belief system that would drive the behaviors that you would want to exhibit to get the new result in those relationships? And that's how you improve emotional intelligence, and that's how you measure emotional intelligence. It's based off of the effectiveness we have in our relationships with others. So if you like this story, we're excited to be able to share many more of these stories with you as we create more of these videos to help you and to help me to grow in our ability to be better humans. So please join us by subscribing below. Share some of your stories that we can create some videos for you to be able to help you on your journey of being a better human, a better parent, a better employee, or whatever it is that you're wanting to work on. We'd love to have you come join us and help us on our journey to putting the human back into humanity.